And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Simpsons people. The idea that the tragic loss of a loved one could be determined by another person's decision is devastating. It also could be incomprehensible that it could be a random act. The perpetrator may not be known to the victim or vice versa. The shock of losing someone to murder takes a hold immediately and leaves family members totally bewildered. On today's Open Connection, we're bringing you part 2 of Brenda Wilson's story.
We're grateful that we're able to, to lay Ramona to rest and to be able to bring her home. But we still need that justice for her to find the answers of what happened. Because, she deserves that. Many of the other missing and murdered loved ones deserve answers as well. And we know there's been a track record of, 30 to 35 years where answers come forward. So we've reached that milestone, and we're really hope this is the year. So we really want to push it forward and bring attention to her case.
Do you recall the response that you got when you went to the RCMP?
So when we went to the RCMP, so my mom was the one, she tried to not involve us and, tried to take it all by herself. And, just like the typical mom, she doesn't want her other children to be hurt. And so she was dealing with all of this by herself. And so she went to the police and, they told her, Ramona probably needed a break, she's probably ran away. And my mom said, no, she didn't. We're very close. She would have told me if she was going to go somewhere. She would have brought some of her things with her, which she didn't. All girls bring, all their things with them. They have this big suitcase. So, no, all her stuff was still at home that she would have used if she was going somewhere. And my mom tried to tell them that and try to convince them that, Ramona didn't leave on her own. Something has happened. Something, as bad has happened to her. And we need to do a search. We need to find her. So, yeah, they didn't, it took a while before, they started to do things, but according to reports, I've had reports submitted. My mom had listened to the RCMP reports, and, they say they were right on the ball. But I believe it's just, a lot of things that had happened was RCMP at that time had no plan, for MMIW. There was no protocol or anything like that. Today there is, and even then it's still difficult, right? Because of the racism and stuff like that. And that's what we were dealing with back then as well. We weren't important enough to investigate, to really put every effort into finding. There was zero effort in finding Delphine Nicole, and they've never found her. She's still missing. Same with Cecilia Nicole. She wasn't even known to be missing, until until Ramona went missing, and then her name, was started to circulate. It's just like, then they realized that she was in fact missing. So it's just, yeah, some things I think about from 1994 to today, and it's just, yeah, just can't believe all that. But in 2006 we did a symposium in Prince George because we didn't have any answers, and more people were coming forward, and everybody was sharing how many people were missing and murdered, and so.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Created in 2005, Project ePANA was created by RCMP with the purpose of solving cases of murdered and missing persons along Highway 16. Although it started with the scope of investigating victims on Highway 16, within a year of its formation, it morphed into including victims along Highways 5, 24, and 97. Let us return the conversation with Brenda.
There's a young lady in Prince George, Ayla Sarakoje, that went missing and then was found murdered close to Tabor Mountain. And her tiny little body was just thrown on the side of the road in a ditch. And it's just like, oh my gosh, and that's when, Lately Tene, Rena Zatorsky, and Carrie Sakani Family Services, and quite a few other organizations came together and, organized the MMIW symposium, and all the families came together and, brought forth their recommendations. And out of that report came 33 recommendations, which has been the basis of many of the recommendations that have come forward, to this day, like with the action plan, truth and reconciliation. You will always find something in any of those reports. You'll also find them in the 2006 symposium report. And it's just, that's where it started. And that's where many families had the chance to voice, what they needed and what was missing in trying to find our loved ones. So that went, that next year will be 20 years since that symposium happened. And I look forward to, seeing what the, I know there was going to be a celebration. Well, I don't know what you call it, a celebration or just a remembrance of the symposium, I guess you would say. But I'm just so grateful for that symposium that happened in 2006, because it really brought forward a lot of the services that were needed for MMIW, which were not there when Ramona went missing, or any of the other girls prior to Ramona, or prior to 2006. So, a lot has come. Ramona's murder and many of the other young ladies that have been murdered or missing, it's not in vain. We've empowered them by, being a voice, the families being a voice and standing up for them, honoring them, honoring their spirits, and not forgetting of who they were, and that's I think that's the greatest thing any family member can do, is to stand up for their loved one and to give them a voice, because they don't have their voices now, but we are the ones who have their voice, and we'll stand up for them and just ensure they're never forgotten, and to ensure that there'll be justice, and most of all, that there'll be hope.
Smithers was one of the first places that in the North that was able to host the national inquiry into murdered missing Indigenous women and girls. Did your family get a chance to testify at that time?
Yes. So what happened? I wasn't able to, because I did it later on. Just because I was also a support person. So, that was really difficult. And they weren't going to have anything in Smithers. Yeah, not too many people know this. But they weren't going to do it in Smithers. I had to, really fight for it. And it's like, what are you talking about? This is the beginning of, I'm just like, it has to be there. There are so many families there that have been affected. So they included in a few other places, just because they basically just had the hubs, like Prince George, Terrace, the cities, the town, Prince Rupert. That's all in Vancouver. It's like, no, you need to reach more families than that, and you're gonna miss out all the families that it's mostly affected. And so just a lot of these things, little things, they're not little, things like this happen and nobody hears about it. And there's I'm in so many different places and on different boards and different things where I do hear some of these things that are being planned, and it's just like, what? Did you talk to the family? Did you include this community? Did you talk to the mayor, or did you or the chiefs?
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Walking to raise awareness about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls is a way to honor the lives of those who have been lost, acknowledge the suffering of the families, and advocate for change. The walks also serve to educate the public about the issue and promote a collective effort to end violence against Indigenous communities. Let us return the conversation with Brenda.
So the first walk, we didn't have a lot of people. It was pouring down rain. So, but we had enough people to, make some noise, and people were wondering what was going on. And, we didn't have a lot of materials to make posters, and, they're all getting wet. And so it was hard to even do that, right? Because it was just like, and, so there wasn't hardly any people. And then throughout the years, it started to build momentum where we have more and more people, and we're inviting more family members to be a part. And it's like, oh, we didn't know we could be a part. It's just like, yes, please be a part of it. And, bring your loved one's poster, and, if you want to talk at at the reception, then please feel free. This is for everybody, because we don't want anybody to be left out. And so that's where many of our family members, built up the courage to do their own. And we'd always reiterate it and state, you can do this in your own community. You can. And a few times, I would go to their community and assist them, but not take it over. It's just like, just help them and, just organize it so that they could do it on their own. And it's been great, to be invited back to many of them, and to see the amazing work they do, and how much they have grown from the very start when they first started theirs. And yeah, it's just awesome. And I'm just proud of so many people, so many of the families. There's even with the Chipman family, with how they do a run every year, a relay run, and that's just grown, amazingly, and that's awesome. And they've also built an organization. So, many families are doing different things, and to bring that awareness. And it's just amazing. And I just hope that, more families will be able to do that, to have that courage to stand up for their loved ones.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Traditional healing practices encompass a wide range of approaches, often rooted in cultural beliefs and community traditions that aim to restore balance and well-being. These practices can include ceremonies, herbal remedies, and hands-on techniques. In this final segment of Open Connection, Brenda shares how the impact of residential school hindered her family's healing process.
And my mom was a residential school survivor. So was, so there are, our healing practices, traditional healing practices, or any kind of healing practices were not, brought forth to our family. We didn't know what that was even about, or how to practice anything like that. And it wasn't until probably about 8 or 10 years after that we buried Ramona, that I learned a different way of grieving, rather than alcohol. So I really, and I knew I had to do something different, because I need to be able to, bring this awareness about my sister's murder, and about all MMIW and MMIP, like the men and boys. We started to notice the men and boys as well going missing and murdered. So it was like, I need to do something differently. I can't keep going on like this, because I need to have a clear mind. So that's one of them, right? Is healing your grief, or learning a different way of dealing with your grief, or just learning about grief in general, because a lot of us, don't understand what that is, and what to do with it. Many of us self-medicate through alcohol or drugs, but finding different avenues of and ways of dealing with that is something that many of us need to do, and take that big step. And for me now it's like 20, it'll be 20 years this year. So, and I'm just like, I'm so grateful because I would never have been able to do the work that I do today, with a, with a clouded mind, and still dealing with the grief. I still grieve, but it's a different way. It's not indulging in the alcohol or anything like that. It's really connecting with the earth and doing drumming and singing to release that part of me that hurts, and doing a lot of prayers, and although I'm Gitsan, and the smudging and stuff is not a part of our culture, but it's something that I learned to use when I need to. And then also, but I also learned some of my Gitsan practices, like with the brushing and being on the land and praying on the land. And so I take what I need when I need it, in regards to cultural practices, something that helps me to get through the day, to get through difficult times when it just seems unbearable. Deal with the grief some days, and it's just like, oh my, I need something. And a lot of times reaching out, like when you're just reaching out for help, like counselors, going to retreats. There's MMIW retreats, and I know the one you mentioned about, and and I'm looking forward to that one in Prince George next year. And just being with family and talking about the loved one, and you need to talk about them, like really express their thoughts and feelings of their loved one, because they're carrying it. And it's the hardest part for families to do that. When they gather, they don't talk about their loved one, and if they do, it's when they're when they're not in a good state, and it's really difficult. There are many times people want to talk to me about my sister, and they're not in a good state, and it's just like, I want to honor my sister, and I don't want to talk about her when you don't have a clear mind, when you're not in a good state, and because then the person doesn't know.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but that connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.